Hello and welcome to the Estee Show. Before we dive into today's topic, I want to take a moment to apologize for my absence over the last few weeks and to express my gratitude for your patience. I have a little bit of news, and that's that I embarked on a new role. For those who have been following my journey, you know that the last few years have been rewarding, but also really challenging. I found myself stuck in a cycle that really needed breaking. I took a different approach. If you've been listening to this podcast, you've heard about some of it. And this new position holds a lot of promise. I am excited, I am hopeful, and I am grateful. Moving forward, I'll share more of the details with you, but really, thank you for being with me on this journey. Given the new schedule and demands, I aim to release new episodes once every 2 weeks. Now, on to today's episode. I'm joined by Shane Ursani, and we explore AI from a fresh perspective. In the previous discussions we've had with Rachel, with Arvin, we focused on the capabilities of artificial intelligence, how many jobs it's potentially going to eliminate. But today, we'll delve into the new job opportunities that AI can create, particularly in response to the risks that need to be managed. A little bit about Shane. Shane is a technical engineering leader who has over 20 years of experience. Currently, he's director of engineering at Vizient, which is a healthcare performance improvement company. He drove innovation and led a lot of teams across many industries. Shane is an AI enthusiast. He reads the latest trends. I can always reach out to him and say, hey, what do you think about that article? And he always has a ton of information to share. So we decided to take this conversation that we've been having and bring it to the podcast. Shane has an MBA from the USC and a bachelor's in computer science from the University of Alaska Anchorage. On a personal note, Shane was an engineering partner at a previous company where he taught me the incredible magic that can happen when engineering and product teams collaborate effectively. Let's talk about the current anti-AI sentiment. Today, an article on The Verge reported that Procreate, which is an iPad design app, has committed to avoiding generative AI tools in its products. The CEO, James Kuda, stated in a video that posted on X, "We're not going to be introducing any generative AI into our products. I don't like what's happening to the industry, and I don't like what it's doing to artists." Another article published by The Economist titled, "Artificial Intelligence is Losing Hype." The article highlights concerns among investors regarding AI's profitabilities, with share prices of the major AI firms dropping 15% since last month. They're nervous that the profits that were projected to AI aren't going to materialize. So there are two pieces to this. Observers are increasingly questioning the limitations of large language models that power services like ChatGPT, and at the same time, they're understanding the risks that using artificial intelligence creates and all of the new rules that will have to be in place to mitigate those risks. So for example, if you have a chatbot that's generating information and having conversations with customers, you have to make sure that this chatbot won't do something egregious or create a policy that's going to hurt your margins, that's going to destroy your business by giving away everything for free, for example. And then The Motley Fool, which is an investor website, published today on August 19th that while the AI market is currently thriving, it's likely to slow down in 2025. So who is this episode for? Some episodes are packed with practical tips, like the recent conversation with Akash. I got a lot of feedback on it where people are like, oh, I need to consider fractional product management. I tried this, I tried that. It's perfect for note-taking. While other episodes are more about engaging discussions to enjoy during a stroll or a jog. This episode falls into the latter category, offering an intriguing conversation about what the future may hold as AI tools evolve and integrate into various aspects of our work. As always, I love hearing from you. Please share your comments, your feedback. And without further ado, let's get started. Shane, welcome to the show. I am so excited to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me, Estee. Really happy to be here and to see you after a little while.
Your relationship, I think, was one of my first collaborations between product management and engineering. You, as a director of engineering, taught me a lot about architecture, scalability, how to think about building things. And we've been in touch since our careers parted ways a couple of years ago. And you've become one of the biggest AI enthusiasts that I know. So one of the conversations we keep on having in different formats I said, Shane, let's have this conversation in front of an audience. And I'm really glad that you said yes. My aunt likes to say that 90% of the conversations people have is repeat. So here's another one of those opportunities to repeat the conversation. Let's jump into the state of the job market. If you could give a little bit of an overview of the unprecedented times that we live in, what the last few years have been, but really how it's shaping up and what the next few years are going to look like.
Yeah, absolutely. I can definitely start with, a recent summary of what has really like transpired over the last couple years, bringing us to where we are today. So, I would say like starting in 2022, there was a major hiring boom, as a lot of us know that worked in tech, especially like during the pandemic. There was a incredible hiring spree all across, where companies were just looking to invest and try to grow. That was accelerated also with a pretty big like startup scene, and a lot of different companies were kind of popping up. And that's actually how you and I started working. Overall, I would say we basically went through this 2022 hiring boom. And even when we worked together, it was very similar. It just followed exactly that trajectory. It led to overhiring. And I think that essentially set the stage for a significant adjustment going into the next year. And actually even the latter part of 2022.
Is the cycle correct to say that interest rates are low, so money is cheap? So companies have money they want to spend, so they say, let's use that money for hiring, even if they don't necessarily need to hire for those roles. So they end up hiring, overhiring. Companies are bloated. That leads to packing the middle management. Maybe startups hire roles they think they need, but then the bigger companies will hire roles that they just don't want their competitors to have and they don't have. And then once the interest rates start rising, money becomes more expensive. It's harder to fundraise. Profits are suddenly more elusive and harder to get by. And then companies say, oops, we overhired. Now we need to be more careful about our margins. And therefore, we need to cut expenses, layoffs, reduce middle management.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think overall you speak very correctly. I think when money is cheap, interest rates were low. Fundraising was also very easy because money was just like readily available. So if you just kind of look at it from a high level perspective, when you're doing, your net present value of a project that you're working on, if money is cheap, you can get capital very easily. You can get a larger return, on your investment by working on a project. So it kind of led to this massive like growth spree where, let's say there was a company that was a startup, or even, other companies like mid-size or larger companies that look to, want to build new things or provide more offerings to their customers. To do that, you need more people, you need human manpower to do it. And essentially that led itself to this cycle where it was this massive boom. And then once the market started realizing that we will no longer be able to get the returns that we were expecting, things just started to change, and then getting capital becomes more expensive, which means that when you're doing your net present value of, hey, like I have a new project, to get that return of investment becomes harder and harder. And essentially that leads itself down to this feeling that, okay, we have overhired now and we need to kind of focus on what we do best.
One question for you here. Comparing the, let's say, 10 big companies, the Amazon, Meta, Googles that are doing this to the rest of the startups, do you think it's an accurate comparison? Are the big companies setting the trends for the startups? Or are they a little bit of different realms because those groups are profitable and startups are really looking for product market fit?
I think it happened both in big tech and in startups. It was something very similar. It also led to even acquisitions of these smaller startups from big tech because they have so much money. If you look at big tech balance sheets, they have a lot of cash. A lot of them, like Tesla, Google, Meta, like they're all sitting, Microsoft, they're all sitting on like large amounts of cash. And that also led to some M&A activity, but also the fact that everyone thought that, okay, well, we need to also hire because we will keep talent away from our competitors. So there was some of that action also going on. So there would be companies that would be contacting all sorts of individuals across the board. As you would recall, in-office was no longer a thing during the pandemic. So all these big tech companies started hiring outside of their normal areas that they would hire in, let's say, Silicon Valley or the areas that they operated in traditionally. And that also kind of allowed this whole thing to kind of keep growing. And a lot of people who were living in the big areas, let's say in San Francisco or the Bay Area, they moved out into other areas in the US to take advantage of the arbitrage of making California salary but living in Iowa.
Things move into 2024 and inflation is stabilizing. The economy is supposedly getting better. That being said, according to CNBC, layoffs, and I didn't check this for a couple of months, but in February, they were on track to be higher than the same time previous year. So companies are still purging employees, even though the economics is getting better. And there are less job openings, even though a lot of the companies have stopped their hiring freezes. So the question is, are layoffs the new normal? Are companies going to start hiring again? Are their jobs going to be the same? Or are things going to fundamentally change in the future? And obviously the big piece that everyone's talking about is AI. And how does this impact hiring and firing and how those companies function?
Yeah, a lot of these things are interconnected. And, I would say we can even kind of go back to 2023, even before we reached 2024. And 2023 is when we went through this massive correction, as we were talking about earlier. The stats I was looking at, over 250,000 tech workers were laid off during that time. And Meta, for example, if I remember correctly, 2 massive rounds of layoffs, like within the same calendar year. This is Google, Microsoft, like Tesla, all the big tech companies were going through this correction. And further along with like the fact that, we had this big economic downturn and essentially kind of squeezed out that, okay, like we have our core products. Let's just focus on that. Let's not worry about expanding our business just because it's like really difficult to do in this kind of a market. So as we have moved into 2024, to what you stated, like things have began to recover, but at the same time, ChatGPT came out, what is it, like a little over a year ago? And that has started to also make an impact, so like you were saying, artificial intelligence and specifically generative AI has been what's really blown this thing up, where now we have this general job market situation where we overhired. Now we're going through the correction and, still having layoffs here and there, and still hasn't completely bottomed out probably. But AI also has given this promise of increased productivity for companies. And that itself is also lending itself to us being in the situation. So I think I was looking at the Bureau of Labor Statistics, specifically about like software engineering. Overall, like from 2022 to 2032, there's supposed to be a 16% job growth in that field. But other fields that are also like kind of emerging, like the AI, machine learning, and cybersecurity, those are probably the ones that are also going to benefit from a lot of growth, especially with generative AI. So, companies have now started to heavily like invest in AI technologies, and that's what's driving kind of the demand in that area. So I think speaking specific job openings, if I may, I think, you would think that, okay, like now generative AI is here. There's a lot of focus on it. That must mean that data scientists and data engineers and machine learning engineers are just the ones that are in demand, right? I think what's also surprising is that there's already...
Is that true or no? Are the data scientists more in demand or are they not more in demand? Because I feel like a lot of companies also say, like, everyone's, what was it, 92% 2 quarters ago of companies used artificial intelligence in their earnings reports. But of course, it's not true that all the companies are using it. So is it an illusion? Do you remember, I think in 2019 and 2020, it was blockchain. Everything was blockchain. Then there was also big data. Yeah. Everyone was suddenly a big data expert. It's artificial intelligence. The big companies have been doing artificial intelligence for a really long time already. We've had people from Amazon, from Facebook talk about it. Like, it's nothing new there. It's just the ChatGPT commercialized it for the everyday user, so everyone's talking about it. So my question is it more of an illusion and a hype thing in terms of the way it's penetrating the market?
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point. It is, some of the semantics or the words that people are using now. Like any company, if you're not talking about AI in your earnings calls and stuff, it's like a big red flag to investors because they're like, hey, AI is being valued very highly right now. AI companies are the ones who are receiving all the venture capitalist funding right now. They're able to raise money pretty easily as compared to every other industry right now. While there is an increased demand for AI talent, there isn't a lack of supply of machine learning engineers and other data scientists. So that's actually pretty telling. I think we actually have a bigger supply of those folks than we do have growth in jobs at this point.
So according to the law of economics, which might be the only thing I remember from the econ class in business school, is supply and demand. That's what sets the price. So if you're saying there's still more supply of talent than there is demand for that talent, that should mean that the price for that talent, i.e. compensation and salaries, has gone down for those roles. Now, on a personal level, I can attest to the fact that salaries I see have dropped for engineers, for product managers, for all of those tech roles where we've seen a huge number of layoffs, but that's anecdotal. Do you have data on what happened to compensation for those roles?
Yeah, so good question. I see overall different reports provide different information, but what I have seen is like consensus wise, it's being argued that salaries have not declined, but at the same time, they haven't really gone up either. Now, if I were to look at anecdotally from what I have seen, on a personal level, it does seem salaries have went down for individual roles and what is being offered in the market. And I think, for example, I looked up for an average, software engineer mid-level in 2024, about like $125,000, and for seniors, $145,000. I don't think that has really like changed very much than what it used to be in the past. I think obviously like this is an average, it's not going to represent like every company based on like, which industries that they're in, but the averages like seem to say that there hasn't really been too many changes. But I'll also add that I think year over year, it's only been like a 0.1% year over year change in 2024. So it's pretty flat. What you can also say is that, well, it hasn't really adjusted for inflation, which it hasn't. And we've had some massive inflation issues in the States.
So you're saying even if salaries haven't gone up, the fact that inflation has been rising at a higher rate than the salaries means people's take home has been lower.
Decreased. Yeah, that's right. That's right.
Going back to artificial intelligence and the role that it's playing in companies, and also there seems to be like two types of companies now, the non-AI companies and the AI companies, and there's a reason why every single company wants to call itself an AI company, is because the non-AI companies have been in we need to conserve cash mode since pretty much 2022, where it became harder to fundraise. And they're trying to become profitable. They're trying to waste less money, hence all the layoffs, et cetera, because they can't raise money. At the same time, we see the fundraisers throwing money at companies that are AI companies. NVIDIA, everyone can't stop talking about it. OpenAI, all of these companies seem to be flush with cash. How does that impact fundraising? What are sort of the hot companies of the future, as well as roles in non-AI companies?
Right. Yeah, fundraising, right? Like if you start with fundraising, it has been relatively easier for AI companies to raise funding. Even at this point, like things have changed quite a bit. Earlier, when OpenAI came out and everyone was really impressed by what it could do, you had kind of this arms race going on where a bunch of startups started kind of coming in and saying we want to build our own foundational models, and that created companies like Mistral, which does open source. Databricks has their own new open source. Google obviously with Gemini, Meta with Llama. Now we're on Llama 3, and that is open source. But there's a mix of an Anthropic, I can't forget them. They have Claude, which is a proprietary one. I think in general though, while there has been
that those models are available to end users, Claude, Gemini, anyone can use them. That's crazy.
Yes, it really is making an impact. Companies like the company I work for currently, they have really heavily invested in productivity gains from AI, generative AI. So our company licensed ChatGPT Enterprise, and now many people in the company have access to that tooling, and we're learning how to do our jobs like better, faster, and really training up our staff so that all their individual roles of our engineers, like whether they're software engineers, data engineers, front-end engineers, or business analysts, product managers, everything is kind of being more often now we can actually do our jobs a little bit better.
So two questions there. Number one, have you seen that impact? Is the output better as a result of everyone at the company having access to GPT Enterprise?
It's in the early stages. In our case, it has been a very recent thing, and we're still in the training mode in the sense that people are still like learning. But, there's obviously people like I'm an enthusiast. I've been using it for a while. I pay for my own personal ChatGPT Plus plan. I currently, enjoy that. I tried out Cloud Opus, also on a personal level. I'm really impressed by that model as well. But depending on what your role is, it's really going to change your job in a different way. So if I'm a software engineer, I can use ChatGPT Enterprise to help me write unit tests for my code or help me solve a bug. I can paste my code in there and it can give me feedback and I can kind of figure out the problem. We also
so the two things based on what you're describing, the two things that people should be seeing is number one, quicker output, right? Like if it took you a week to solve something, now it should take you 2-3 days with the help you'll get from ChatGPT. And the second one is quality, right? Like if before you were just spinning something out and not writing the unit test, now you have the bandwidth or the tools to write the unit tests.
And the thing is, like, you could do things faster. So you're right. It's about time savings there. Instead of you having to type everything out, you might get a head start by it being able to give you at least some sort of a template or skeleton to get started with. And then you can start faster and maybe able to accomplish what you want to do quicker. I would say also just a nuance here is that generative AI, like these tools, they benefit more junior and mid-level engineers more than they do senior. Senior engineers may see like a little bump in productivity just because they're just way more knowledgeable and they have seen things. But more junior and mid-level software engineers, I'll see a greater benefit because it kind of evens out the playing field, so to speak. The other tool I have also used at our company right now is GitHub Copilot. That is like what you could think of it as like a more fancy code completion tool, where before you would write some code like Python or Java or C#, whatever you were doing. And if you would type in something, hit dot, it would autocomplete what functions or methods are available. Then you would click that and you don't have to memorize like libraries and frameworks. With GitHub Copilot, instead of like getting a little bit of your source code auto-completed, it can actually generate the entire function for you, just like that. And over time, it gets better the more it sees you working and the more it sees of your code base. For that role, software engineering, it really benefits by using this tool in that way.
But you're saying it's still too early to see the impact. Like there's just not large adoption across
measurable impact. Yeah. At least in our case, a measurable impact it's a bit early to say. But I definitely think from what I have seen, you could definitely benefit. You might spin your wheels going on Stack Overflow and trying to figure out like, why you're having a certain issue. Now, Gen AI is available to you to maybe find that answer a little bit faster. So to measure that impact, it's a bit hard right now. Maybe some places have done it earlier and they've seen those benefits, but the journey in our company has just kind of started.
And the other question I had for you was proprietary data. So how do you make sure if someone's trying to complete the code, all of the information is going in, how do you make sure that the company that needs to stay private stays
private? Yeah.
Private? Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So at least in this case that I was describing, like ChatGPT Enterprise is for the company. They have a deal that, our data won't be used by OpenAI for training the model. So that data is going to stay, within our tenant and it's not going to go anywhere. And that's kind of the model that OpenAI is like really promoting. And same thing with GitHub Copilot. Microsoft, is the owner or they run GitHub. So there's that trust factor there as well. But if I were to go to any, free open source LLM and started doing it online, then that's definitely a problem. Other way to avoid it is to get an open source model, like let's say Code Llama, and then run it locally within your infrastructure. And then, you can run a chatbot or something on top of that.
So that way you're leveraging their information, but you're not giving any information back.
Yeah. In that sense, right?
Cool. I know we're both Elon Musk enthusiasts. We can criticize it, but I'm obsessed with him. Okay, I think that's clear. But he has an interesting AI project going on. Can we talk a little bit about his $6 billion project.
Yeah. I mean, I think overall, as we were talking earlier, like there's an arms race going on with having competitive like foundational models, and
And
there's
why is he pissed at OpenAI? Like he was involved in its founding, and what happened there?
Yeah, I think he was one of the initial co-founders, if I'm not wrong. And I think there was, some fallout when it came to how he wanted to kind of influence certain decisions. And there was a disagreement with Sam Altman, who's the CEO of OpenAI. And at that point, I think he pulled out. Some of the criticism that he's given online to OpenAI has been around the fact that OpenAI started as like a not-for-profit and now has actually become or is becoming a for-profit company. And with that said, and what Elon Musk says about AI safety or his views on AI safety, I think he has like a big disagreement with how things are going with OpenAI in that sense. And he wants to, use one of his companies called XAI to come up with another competitor, foundational model competitor to what OpenAI has.
Is
but
he
I would say,
late to the game?
Probably too early to tell, but I definitely, am in favor of more competition is just better for the market. We have like, I would say main competitors right now are, obviously OpenAI, Anthropic. Anthropic is sort of backed by Google and Amazon, but, they're still a small company. And then OpenAI is backed by Microsoft. And that's kind of how that's working, because you need big tech for the amount of capital that's required to train these models. Like you need a lot of compute. And the other ones, Google Gemini and Meta, I would say, those are probably the big players here.
So basically,
I'm not sure if I'm missing anyone.
With what you're saying, the big players remain the big players, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like even the new or independent AI companies are backed by the existing top companies.
Right.
So for them, it's a strategy for survival, because Meta, they're always looking to keep growing, and they need to unlock new things because they're pretty much tapped into, the market's tapped out.
Absolutely. And that's a great observation. The reason it is this way is because venture capitalists cannot, like there's no ability for them to raise the amount of money that's needed for these AI systems, to be trained. You need a lot of money, and venture capitalists, like the way that is set up is not going to be able to provide that funding. And that is why big tech has such a huge advantage here, because they're all sitting on stockpiles of cash
that they're looking to invest. I was thinking, imagine being like the Apple engineer who worked on the car, like who worked on the stuff that no one ends up using it. Yeah, exactly. I think those people have been dispersed and into other parts of the company. And I think probably some of it has to do with Apple Intelligence, possibly. Oh, because they don't want to let their talent free, because then they can compromise.
Yeah, definitely. I would, to Apple's credit though, they did a pretty good job of not overhiring. They were probably the only big tech company that didn't overhire. If they did, it was probably slight, but I don't remember seeing that many layoffs come out of Apple.
I'll double check on that, but they do seem to be doing stuff like a bit on their own, right? They're less software and more hardware. It's
a hardware company, but they're also pretty good at software. I think when it comes to AI itself, there was this perception about them being behind, and to a degree that criticism is right, because in the latest WWDC conference that just happened, Apple has some capabilities that's going to run on device, which is brilliant from their perspective, but for workloads or tasks that need a bit more, they have like two other options. One is running it in Apple servers and like a private network, and if that can't handle it either, then they made that enterprise deal with OpenAI, and they'll send data from our iPhones to OpenAI to complete the task and kind of bring it back to the phone.
And people are freaking out about the privacy implications there.
Yeah, they have been. I'm not so sure, because I think Apple does a pretty good job of making sure that they really care about what is on your phone, and data is going to stay secure. And I think that's a commitment that they've always made, and just traditionally speaking, versus someone like a Google.
Right. Who shares everything, and then all the companies get sued for sharing their information with Google. It's kind of like, it's a little bit of a catch-22, because in order to grow, companies need to share data with Google and Facebook so that they can advertise on your behalf and find the right customers. But if you share too much data, or if you're in a regulated industry, you're screwed. So it's like you either have to figure out a different way to grow into market, or you have to be okay with a much worse marketing strategy because you won't be able to target efficiently.
Right.
NVIDIA. We're
Oh,
talking
yes.
about software, hardware. We spoke about the models. What about
Yeah.
all of the compute power that is allowing for NVIDIA to become, is it the wealthiest company, or the amount it shot up in value? It's worth 10 Teslas.
Yeah, I think at least recently, so they were the most valuable company for a little bit, and then I think Apple after WWDC kind of retook that top spot, but
Reclaimed its
yeah.
claim to
But
fame.
with that said, they're incredibly valuable company, and the main reason, simple terms, is that their GPUs are so ahead of the competition. Some people even say 2 years ahead of the competition. And everyone who has to train an AI model needs like that H100, which is their amazing GPU that is incredibly tough to build. NVIDIA has it down. And that is like, what you were talking about, that Elon Musk and $6 billion, like gigafactory that he wants to build for compute. That is all like H100 chips that they've purchased. And
so he doesn't want to compete with a Llama 3. He wants to compete with NVIDIA.
Yeah, I think his AI is proprietary. And, I think the goal is also AGI eventually, just like it is for Meta and Google and OpenAI. The goal is to reach AGI and
Artificial
general intelligence. Yeah. Yes.
Sorry, what does that mean? AGI, like in layman's terms, that means that a computer is literally as smart as a person, or?
Yeah, everyone will say something different, but overall, I think the general intelligence is like as smart as a human. And then there's something else called ASI.
As smart as which human?
But if you look at it like deeply, like GPT-2 was as smart as a preschooler. GPT-3 was, I think, like a maybe seventh grader, like middle school. And GPT-4 is supposed to be like a high schooler, roughly speaking. And I think AGI is going to be, as smart as possibly like an AI researcher, for example. So if you can reach AGI, then you might have, let's say, a PhD, AI bot, or an AI that could do the work of like an AI researcher, which means that if you deploy many of those, that significantly increases the ability to have greater innovation at a faster pace, because we have limited amount of like humans with those kind of credentials. But if an artificial intelligence could do that and you can duplicate that, you're going to have massive amounts of innovations in a very short amount of time. And going from AGI to ASI, super intelligence, that is when the machines are smarter than humans. And then there's a lot of like concerns about AI safety, which is some of the news that you might have seen is around.
AI taking over the world and why everyone's quitting OpenAI.
Like OpenAI, yeah, there were some resignations, because of their feeling that they're not getting enough attention at the company, or enough like resources dedicated. You need compute to use to help figure out like what are some of the best safety measures. And I think initially when OpenAI did that, they had, I think, wanted to dedicate between 10 and 30%, I believe, of compute that OpenAI had into safety, but they ended up getting less than 10%. And I think there was this feeling that OpenAI is just not doing it. And in protest, people started resigning.
For someone listening to this, someone could be feeling helpless, right? Like, what am I supposed to do? These geniuses sitting at OpenAI can't even get on alignment about how to prevent this from taking over the world. What's your recommendation for regular people who are interested in this to not fall behind the curve?
Yeah, a lot of what we just talked about right now is that's what you read in the papers and stuff. And, there could be some reality that comes out of it. We just don't know. But ultimately, from my research, I think ultimately AI is going to change the way we work. It would be best to make yourself aware of how AI impacts your job and what are some of those. If you basically break it down, think of yourself as someone who does many different tasks, throughout the day. You speak with people, you work on something, you write something, etc., right? And if some of those tasks get automated away to an AI, you can think of it as a way of like time savings, and you can then focus on more meaningful work instead of what you had to do that might have been mundane. If you're a product manager and you are required to write stories and you're typing them in, and you might not have a business analyst available to you. So if you had an AI teammate with you, you can deploy some of the more mundane stuff to that AI while you focus in on the big picture, like more strategy, more communication, better communication across the org, getting alignment with senior leadership. So I would say, think of it as tasks. And, the more you read about the industry and your own work, what are some of those things that are going to be automated? Like think about those. And once they are automated, how do you work with those tools? So one thing I think we didn't get to discuss yet was Devon AI, which is supposed to be, it's made by a company called Cognition Labs, and it's supposed to be like the first AI software engineer. There was a lot of hype on the video, and then later on there was a lot of rebuttals and saying that, hey, Cognition maybe faked this or overstated its capabilities, which could be essentially true. But I think overall the trend is there. Like, we are trending in that direction. And Devon AI, tools like Devon AI, not particularly this one, there is going to be some more automation around software engineering. And software engineers aren't only writing code, they do many other things alongside writing code. So if you can automate some of the writing code portion, I think you would benefit from learning how to use these tools or being aware of these tools and shifting your skill set to focus on things that are a bit more meaningful and a human could do better. So I would definitely give like that advice, really being in tune with what's going on.
And aside from AI, LLM, general intelligence, what's your advice to people listening to this conversation?
With the amount of innovation that we're having, it's really, really exciting. Learn as much as you can about how AI is going to change the way we work. It's going to change in other ways as well, where it's going to start coming on our phones. So the more you understand about its capabilities, the better off you'll be in changing your mindset. Overall, though, even specifically, if you understand like how we integrate what we build in tech with AI, start thinking about that too. So there's something called the new LLM stack, and large language models, LLMs, they're primarily trained with data scientists and some machine learning engineers. But how do software engineers interact with those teams, and how do you build an AI enabled application that's going to provide a lot of value to our customers, to essentially provide more and more value to what you're building? So I would say learning that, understanding that, there's like a lot of different frameworks that are coming out, such as like LangChain and LangGraph, and there's AI agents that are coming out. Similar to what we were saying, AI agents, they basically are supposed to be the thing for 2024. There's a lot of focus on that right now. And I would say that is supposed to basically act in a way that you can create a bunch of tasks and then have AI agents kind of figure out how to do it. So to give you an example, I was kind of reading about this where you can think of it in this way. If let's say you were building a customer support like chatbot. So if you go on a website that provides a service or e-commerce, you can essentially have like different agents doing different things for you. So the first thing would be the first AI agent that answers or takes the first question in that, hey, what's the status of my order? It will be able to then route it to the appropriate agent to figure out what it is. So there's like maybe a order status agent that has access to data within the ecosystem, like your databases, and is able to pull out that information and then write back like a response, natural language. So there could be other types of agents that, let's say, technical support. So you're like, hey, I bought this product from you, but I don't know how to use it, or I'm having trouble using it. And then it will route you to the appropriate AI agent. So I think we're starting to move away from general purpose models into maybe smaller, more specialized models, and then creating like some sort of a system, that ecosystem that connects all of them. So there's a lot of innovation going on. It's still not, again, ready for prime time really, but it's starting to get there. And there's just like this rapid evolution going on.
We'll quickly, probably within the next year, start seeing more and more applications. And I imagine we'll be able to hire our own AI agents for a subscription or something.
I mean, entirely possible. I think like depending on workflows and like how some of these tools pan out and how usable they become, because I think there are different ways to do AI agents right now, but they might not be what they look like next year. There might be a better technique or better way of doing it. So right now there's something called LangGraph, which is a little bit lower level. And then some other team created like an open source one called Crew AI, which does AI agents with a little bit less code, a little bit more higher level abstraction. But you don't really know if those are going to pan out in the way that they have currently. And there could be something completely different that is better and easier to use and can come from any one of these companies that are competing in this space.
I love it. Shane, thank you so much.
Thank you so much for having me, Estee. Really a pleasure speaking with you again.
We'll continue this conversation. I feel like as everything's developing, we need to have regular updates.
Check-ins, absolutely.
If you've gotten this far, thank you for listening to another one of my episodes. Remember to follow the Estee Show on whichever platform you use to listen to podcasts. If you have any feedback, questions, or just want to share your own experiences, don't be shy. Hit me up on LinkedIn or email. That's estee.podcast@gmail.com. I'm all ears. Until next time, stay curious, stay bold, and never stop learning.